welcome, guys, to Person, Place, or Thing, where we talk about a person, a place, and a thing for this week in history. I do need to put a disclaimer out there because today's topics are going to be hard to hear, so viewer discretion is advised. And also, please remember that history is what history is. And today's article does not reflect the opinions of myself, my guest, the commenters, or my admin. So let's jump right into it. Our guest today is going to be, let me get up there, Christy Savage. Christy, can you please request the box? Please remember that this is a featured show, so we do have to follow featured show rules. No drinking, no cussing, no nudity, so keep your clothes on, Christy. So this is my lovely guest today. Her name is Christy. Please, everybody, make sure that you hit her with a favorite. Christy, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and what you do on your stream and when you stream?
I've only really streamed once, but I am streaming again tonight for the second time ever.
Yay! What time?
Well, I work till 10, so it'll probably be closer to 10:45, 11.
Perfect. So everybody make sure you go show this lovely lady some support. She's new to streaming and we want to make sure that we kick her off on the right foot. All right, dear, I'm going to have you jump out of the box and we're going to jump right into it. When you jump out, go ahead and request the box again and we'll talk about fun facts and tidbits.
Okay.
Thank you, Christy. All right, so today's person is actually three different people. It's going to be James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. On June 21st of 1964, at the beginning of what was known as Freedom Summer, three civil rights workers, Michael Henry Schwerner, James Earl Chaney, and Andrew Goodman lost their lives to Klan violence in what would be a case that gained national attention for the past 40 years. A couple of weeks prior to their death on Memorial Day in 1964, Werner and Chaney had arranged to set up a freedom school at Mount Zion Church in nearby Longdale. Klan members, thinking that they were going to find them at a business meeting at the church, surrounded the church. They beat some of the churchgoers and then they burned the church. But fortunately for Schwerner and Chaney, they were not there at the time. They were actually in Ohio at a national conference that was teaching people how to take part in the Freedom Summer program. When word got to Ohio, Schwerner and Chaney jumped in their core car and headed back to Mississippi, along with Andrew Goodman, who they had just recruited to come help. As they were headed back to the Corps office and Meridian, they were pulled over and arrested by Neshoba County Deputy Cecil Price, who happened to be a member of the local Klan. Deputy Price jailed the three civil rights workers, and while they were in jail, he contacted Edgar Ray, going over the exact details of what happened that afternoon is unclear. But what is clear is that around 10 p.m., the three young men were released from jail as they departed from the county jail, Philadelphia. They drove back towards the Meridian, and then they were once again pulled over by Deputy Price, along with two full carloads of Klansmen. The three men were put into a police car and driven to a remote location. And when they were driven to that location, Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman were both killed by close-range shots fired by Klansmen Wayne Robert, James Earl, and Chaney was savagely beaten and tortured prior to being killed himself. The Klansmen took their bodies and buried them in an earthen dam on another Klansman's property, where the bodies laid undiscovered for 6 weeks. The disappearance of the three men was highly controversial in that area. Some Mississippi legislators and powers thought that it was a publicity stunt or a hoax. But 6 weeks later, when they did find the bodies, it was confirmed that these three young men had been savagely unalived and their bodies had been disposed. Though they found the three bodies 6 miles west, or 6 miles southwest in Philadelphia, and 6 miles west where they were last seen. So they put the bodies, they put them in a Jackson. So they sent them to a hospital to identify all three of them, and they were identified as the three missing men. And despite all of the evidence that was gained during the investigation, the state of Mississippi refused to press any murder charges against any of the perpetrators of the crime. And 3 years later, in 1967, the federal government pressed charges against 18 individuals for violating the civil rights of Schwerner and Cheney and Goodman. There was no federal murder statute under which to try the men who had killed them, so this was the best that they could do. After the trial, 7 men, including Deputy Price and Sam Bowers, the Imperial Wizard, who had ordered Schwerner's elimination, Wayne Roberts, who had been the triggerman that killed Schwerner and Goodman, were found guilty. 7 others were acquitted, and the charges were all dropped, and there was a hung jury on Edgar Ray. It was with one of the holdout jurors saying that she could never convict a preacher after what he had done. Josh, hi. The trial judge, who was a known segregationist, on live TV, I don't mean to laugh because it's not funny. It's not funny at all. It's astonishing to me because what the judge had said is that they killed one N-word, one Jew, and one white guy. To me, that would never fly in today's days. So it's just mind-boggling to me that this kind of behavior was acceptable by a judge. The memory of the killings and what happened in Mississippi haunted the members of the communities in the Shelby County and the greater area of Mississippi. For over 40 years, people were seeking justice. As a small measure of justice, in 2005, 41 years after the murder, Edgar was finally tried and convicted and sentenced to 3 20-year sentences for the killings of Michael Schwerner, James Cheney, and Andrew Goodman. To this date, he is the only perpetrator of the crime who was convicted or even tried of any murder charges in the killing. So that's the story of the 3 missing people. I know it's touchy. I do need to mention that I was not trying to highlight on the KKK. I was trying to highlight on these brutal injustices kickstarting the freedoms and the unity that we're approaching. And I think that if people talk about it and we educate people on how bad things really were for other human beings, then maybe we can continue to go the right way and not repeat our past mistakes. So go ahead and request the box, Christy. I would like to say we're going to go over fun facts and tidbits here, but there's nothing fun or good about this topic. The only good thing that came from this is that it spurred the advancements of the rights of our Black community. Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Do you have any thoughts or feelings on the article?
Um, I tried to find some facts last night, but you pretty much covered everything I found.
Well, thank you. Okay, so I found some. At the height of the movement, Goodman joined the Freedom Summer in 1964 to register African Americans to vote. So that was actually his mission. It was to make sure that everybody could vote. Um, Andrew Goodman was a college student who volunteered to work in voter registration, education, and civil rights as part of the Mississippi Summer Program. So that tells me that he was very, very young. He was in college still. Um, and on Memorial Day, 1964, Schwerner and Cheney spoke to the congregation at Mount Zion in rural Neshoba County about setting up a freedom school, a type of alternative middle school and high school that helped to organize African Americans for political and cultural engagement. Um, it's okay. We don't kick people. It's okay. Unless they're being awfully rude, they're allowed to have their opinions and stuff. Um, when the Klansmen caught up to Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, they forced the men into one of the mob's vehicles and drove them to a secluded county road. Cheney, a black man, was beaten with chains, castrated, and shot, while Schwerner and Goodman, the two activists, were forced to watch. That to me is absolutely insane. Could you imagine that happening today in today's society?
No, because to be honest, my fiance is an African American. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I
it to me
imagine.
it's mind blowing, and it I often wonder where we would be in American culture had a lot of these people not lost their lives prematurely. How much good a lot of these people could have done for the American culture, for us as human beings. And it breaks my heart that lives were snuffed out for such an unjust reason.
I've never honestly understood, like, you could call it racism.
It
And
is
like,
racism.
to me, everybody should just be seen equally.
As people, yes,
Yeah, as
I
people.
agree. As people, yep, I completely agree with you. And that's all that I've got for that topic. So go ahead and jump out of the box and just go ahead and request it back and just stay in the queue. Um, Welcome to Person, Place, and Thing, where we talk about a person, a place, and a thing for this week in history. We just talked about um, three civil rights activists that were brutally murdered in Mississippi. They were James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. Um, and our place is going to be Detroit, Michigan. I know that our guest lives close to Detroit, Michigan, so I'm hoping that she's got some fun facts for us. So this again is another very, very, very touchy subject. This is going to be about the race wars that took place on June 20th in 1943 in Detroit, Michigan. Um, so members of the KKK and local Caucasian aggressors brawl against groups of African Americans. Altercations between the youths of different ethnic backgrounds began in Belle Isle on June 20th, and that's a small island off of Detroit's mainland. This brawl grew larger and eventually developed into a whites first black standoff. So the first whites and blacks standoff on the Belle Isle Bridge. Rumors from the standoff made their way back into the city, and these rumors included that a black woman was thrown off the Belle Isle Bridge by a white person. There's been talk that woman was pregnant, and they were rumors. There was also a rumor that a white woman was Ard and murdered by a black male on the bridge. And these rumors escalated into an additional 2 days of rioting where these riots were very brutal. There were 25 African American deaths, 7 white deaths, and around 700 people injured. African Americans were destroying the white people's property and businesses, and vice versa. The white people were also destroying the African American communities as well. Um, it almost seems as if different ethnic backgrounds were just looking for an excuse to fight one another. And the police tried to step in, but they simply were not able to control the masses. Plus, this overwhelmingly white police force arrested 1,800 people over the past couple days, and 85% of those arrests were people of color. This suggests one of two things: a racist police force, or the African Americans were the sole aggressors of the riots. Analysts are suggesting that a large number of African Americans migrating from near and far to Detroit due to opportunity in the workplace. There was also suggestions that there was not enough housing for over the 200,000 African Americans were crammed into a 60-block radius. These attacks were the result of Detroit's booming industry, resulting in heavy employment competitions among races in Detroit. It isn't new in Detroit for the racial conflicts. Race riots broke out during the Civil War in 1863, which began due to unrest related to race riots and the military draft. The city had also become a stronghold for the KKK in the 1920s. The race riots of 1943 started largely due to a lack of housing in Detroit when many African American people migrated to the city for job opportunities. In 1943, Polish all white neighborhoods wanted to keep the black community out of their housing projects. So the Detroit Housing Commission said that they would find another place for the black community to live, but they couldn't find anything suitable for them. So the housing authorities later agreed to let blacks into the housing projects. In nearby field, a cross was burning, alluding to the KKK. The following morning, February 27th, 1942, a crowd of armed white men had grown to 1,200 people. Some black tenants who had already signed the lease and paid rent tried to cross the picket line of whites who wanted them to stay out of the projects. This led to a clash between white and black groups. And despite mounting opposition from white groups, 6 black families were allowed to move in at the end of April. And the Detroit Mayor Jeffries activated the National Guard to keep the peace for these 6 families. This was a definite example of patriotism, opportunity, and most importantly, oppression during the war. People who seeked employment had an opportunity for a new job within Detroit's booming industries to help with the war efforts. But at the same time, people in Detroit were challenged with a dividing race where jobs were overwhelmed by one particular race group, the whites. Not to mention the tension from the rumors between disputes. made people from both sides mad, and it kept the fight going. Military was desegregated due to Roosevelt's Executive Order 9981. This did not um, this did not apply to seasoned U.S. people, and they saw a door of opportunity and went through it. But while doing that, they couldn't let others go through it. With that being said, this created tension that led to a battle for opportunity among race groups, resulting in oppression. This oppression is shown when extremely disproportionate white police force makes arrests that were 85% Black. White Detroit's population was only 10%, or there was only 10% of Black population. So for that kind of disproportionate arrests, that to me screams that it was a racist police force. We call that systemic racism today. So it wasn't, it's very patriotic for people to want jobs just for the healthy efforts of the war, but not at the same time due to the fact that they were fighting each other. This oppression made our country look weak, and across powers, German broadcasters have referred to this as the internal disorganization of a country torn by social injustice, race hatreds, regional disputes, and the violence and irritable prolence and gangsterism of the capitalistic police. A plethora of problems can arise from these issues, and the last thing we want is division in a time when we need unity. Our people are a representation of our country, and we are currently fighting two different wars. One against oppression on our homeland, and one against the enemy on the battlefield. The military, now desegregated, is a leap in the right direction, but there is seemingly no way for our neighborhoods to be the same way with ridden of racism. So part of the solutions include imprisonment of white supremacists and groups, abolishment of city segregation, and ruins of street gangs. With a combination of these solutions and the cooperation of our citizens, we can be a united country where we never have to worry about such atrocity happening again. We, the people of the United States, can and will conquer oppression, and hopefully it'll be a problem of the past. Christy, go ahead and request the box. Welcome to Person, Place, and Thing with me, Gopherit, where we talk about a person, a place, and a thing for this week in history. Just about the race wars of Detroit, Michigan for our play. What do you think, Christy?
Well, I thought it was going to be about the Detroit Railroad. I got confused.
That's okay. It's just about the place. That's just the event that I chose to speak on for the place because of June 20th. It started on June 20th, which is today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was learning new things. That's interesting. I didn't know any of this.
The race wars of Detroit, Michigan.
I've seen the movie Detroit, and I don't know if that had to do with the race wars, but it was along those lines. Yep. It was about the riots, which probably had to do with the race wars.
Bingo. That's exactly what it is.
I've seen, so I know a little bit about it.
See, I didn't, until I started researching, I didn't know much at all. I live in Utah. I don't see a lot of racism here, and I'm not trying to be ignorant here. It's just not something that I witness. However, I did travel to South Carolina last year, and that was my first encounter with witnessing actually racism, and that showed me that it is alive and well in
Oh,
America.
because I'm white and my fiance is black, we get stared at all the time and looks and like people mumble things under their breaths, like
Right,
everywhere we go. You would
right.
think, and we just don't understand it.
You don't need to. It's none of your business. You need
Yeah.
to be happy, and that's all that
Yeah.
matters. So, fun facts and tidbits. I'm moving away from the oppression that America is facing today, the racism that America is facing today, the systemic racism specifically, and I'm moving on to something a little bit more light and fun. So, this is about Detroit itself. The first fun fact and tidbit I have is Michigan or Detroit is dubbed the major or the Motor City for a reason. Detroit was home to the first mile of concrete highway, the first four-way, three-color traffic light, and the world's first urban freeway.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Royal systemic racism is racism within our systems. So our police system, our judicial system, our housing system, that's what systemic racism is. Um, So back to what I was saying, it's also the site of the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, the first traffic tunnel between two nations. Hi, Canada! To get to the D, which is Detroit, some Canadians drive north. It is the only major city in America north of Canada. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I don't live far from the Canada Bridge.
That's awesome. So, Detroiters like their spirits. Detroiters like their alcohol. During the Prohibition, it's estimated that some 75% of illegal liquor supplied to the U.S. was smuggled through the city's waterways. And Detroit, aka the Paris of the Midwest, also boasts the nation's oldest soda, Verner's Ginger Ale.
Hmm.
Legend has it that the refreshment was created by accident. Detroit pharmacist James Verner crafted a new drink, and then it was called to serve in the Civil War in 1862. He stored the beverage in an oak cask, and when he came back, he learned that the keg had transformed it into ginger ale. Do you have any fun facts you want to share?
No, not today.
Okay, that's just fine. That's just fine. Everybody, please make sure that you are favoriting my guest, Christy. She'll be live at around 11 p.m. Eastern time.
Mhm.
And it's only going to be her second stream ever. So please, guys, go support her. Let's start her off on the right foot. I'll let you go ahead and jump out of the box. Um, We're here at Person, Place, or Thing, where we talk about a person, a place, or a thing for this week in history. We just spoke about our person, who was actually people, and our place was Detroit, Michigan. Our thing is going to be the Michigan Central Railroad Troop. This is not a race thing, however, it's still pretty sad. It trigger warnings. Um, but it is about the circus, actually. So on June 22nd, 1918, the Hegenberg Wallace Circus was on its way to its next scheduled performance, Hammond, Indiana. More than 300 laborers and circus performers were on board one of the circus's two dedicated trains when it was forced to stop to deal with a mechanical issue. The vast majority of the passengers were asleep and unaware entirely that another train was bearing down on them at full speed, and that in just a few minutes, the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus would suffer one of the worst tragedies it would ever endure in the history of circuses. The Wallace Circus was founded in 1882 by Ren E. Wallace, a horse trader based in Indiana. In its early years, it was first and foremost a traveling horse show with a few exotic animals thrown in to bring in the crowds. As time went on, though, the show developed and acquired a huge and varied animal collection, along with a company of acrobats and performers. What had started as a modest road show traveling a handful of Midwest states eventually became one of the grandest spectacles in the country. The circus rode the rails all over the mainland United States with a show that boasted 3 circus rings and 2 separate stages. 10 acres of canvas and enough space for 20,000 spectators. In 1907, the already massive circus would grow still bigger when Wallace purchased wholesale the Carl Hagenberg Circus, and that's where it became the Hagenberg Wallace. The new show was of such an unwidely size that it was forced to travel the country aboard 2 separate trains, each laden with performers, animals, equipments, circus tents, and more. Any operation of such impressive scale was bound to experience a few incidents here and there, and indeed the Hagenberg Wallace Circus weathered more than its fair share of disaster over the years. Minor train crashes, accidents on the road, and a season of severe floods all took their toll on the circus family, but it soldiered on nonetheless. On the evening of the 21st of June, the Hammond Wreck, 1918. The show had just concluded a successful run in Michigan City and was on its way to the next stop in Hammond, Indiana. One train was well underway and the next was following along, albeit slowly. It was a fact of life that the circus trains were slow, and they were antique stock built in the 1800s. Though they'd been renovated several times, they were still made mostly of wood, in contrast to the predominantly steel rolling stock that had become common on the rails by 1918. So they still had wooden trains, even though steel trains were in production. Their outdated construction was still perfectly legal, but it meant that they were limited to a speed no greater than 25 miles per hour. This steady pace was not a problem for most of those aboard. A collection of more than 300 laborers and circus performers were housed in bunks and cabins throughout the train, and the vast majority of them spent their journey getting some shut-eye in preparation for another hard day work ahead. The slow pace of the train would have made for a relatively good conditions for getting some sleep. Equally though, this limited speed meant very slow progress towards their destination. Progress that had gotten even slower when brakeman Oscar Tim spotted a blazing hot axle bearing midway down the train. Through a series of signals, the engine was brought to a stop, and Tim and several others dismounted to place warning flares on the rails to ward off other trains, and then to see about repairing the overheated axle. Before they could do so, however, a bright light was seen approaching from behind them on the track, another train. Brakeman Tim waved frantically, and he wondered why the approaching engine didn't seem to be slowing down. Surely the driver could see the signal flares, right? Tim sprinted down the track towards it, waving and bellowing. And at the very last moment, he even resorted to throwing one of the flares at the train's window as it was passing by. But it didn't do any good. It didn't stop the train. It didn't even slow down. And at full speed, it plowed directly into the stationary circus train. The wooden construction of the circus train offered little protection for those inside. And the approaching train ground through several fully occupied carriages before coming to a halt. One surviving passenger gave this surreal account of waking from sleep to the sound of the collision and then being violently ejected from the train. And I quote, "I woke up to the sound of splintering wood, and then suddenly I was sitting up. Then there was another crash, and another, and another. I was pounded into my corner of my berth. My scalp was split open. The whole car bucked. It parted down the center as clean as though it had been sliced with a giant knife. I felt my section rising, and the engine of the troop train plowed into it. Then I was away, up in the air, on top of the wreckage, in my shirt and drawers. I put my head down and lay still. A coat came sailing over me and landed on top of me. Then everything was quiet." For those like this survivor who made it through the initial wreck, the danger was not over. Very quickly after the wreck, a fire began. It was later traced back to oil lamps, which had been used for illumination throughout the circus train. Wounded and shocked, those who had been ejected from the train were now locked in a race against time to dig out their fellow survivors before the fire could consume the wreckage. It was a complex rescue operation, and the wreck site a mess of precarious ledges and splintered wood. But the circus folks were used to danger. So clowns, laborers, strongmen, roustabouts, aerialists, and others fell upon the wreck and started hauling survivors out to safety. Slowly, fire companies and local residents arrived on the scene and began to transport the injured to nearby hospitals. Morticians were also called to the wreck, and they began transporting the dead, the bodies, to all of the different funeral homes. They took up every single funeral home that was available in that area. The sheer number of casualties was overwhelming. There was 86 people who had been killed, and a further 127 were injured. So what caused the devastating collision? Why hadn't the approaching train stopped when the driver saw the signal flares and stationary train ahead of him? Could he have really missed the glaring obvious dangers? As it turns out, he had. The driver in question was engineer Alonzo Sargent, and he was driving an empty troop train. The reason why he missed the flares and didn't see the train was simple. Alonzo Sargent had, lulled by a warm cabin, a recent heavy meal, and the gentle rolling motion of the train, had fallen asleep at the controls of the engine. Sargent and the firemen of the train were both arrested, and criminal charges were leveled against them, but they ultimately came to nothing, and the charges were dropped because of a deadlock jury, and that led to a mistrial. So both men escaped with only the overwhelming guilt and shame that they were feeling for causing so much devastation as punishment. Needless to say, losing so many of its performers and workers was a huge blow to the circus, but it was not the final one. The circus continued, and it continued for a long time. Other circuses around the country, hearing of the incident, sent staff and performers to fill out the show. And the Haggard Wallace circus was quite miraculously able to continue. After its run, um, oh, it's run after missing just 2 scheduled shows. So it missed 2 shows after that catastrophe, just 2. That's incredible. Um, it's a remarkable testament to the spirit and determination of the circus family, um, that they were able to carry on in this fashion, even when so many of their numbers were injured and grieving. Um, Indeed, though, forever wounded by trauma of the crash. The circus went on for many years, eventually being acquired by the Ringling Brothers Circus, which, anybody know what the Ringling Brothers Circus is? That's the circus that we know today. And only giving its final, so the Hagenburn Wallace, their final performance was decades later in 1963. And many of those who died in the Showman's Rest crash near Hammond were buried in a dedicated area of Woodlawn Cemetery. I looked at pictures of this cemetery, and I highly recommend that you guys do too, because what they did is for their fallen family members, their circus family members, they gave them huge tombs that were shaped as elephants with their trunks down in a sign of mourning and respect. It's an amazing, amazing cemetery. You guys should definitely go check that out. Um, and a lot of circus performers, even today, still choose to be buried in that cemetery. It is the Woodlawn Cemetery. So it's Woodlawn. Woodlawn, yes. And it's still really popular, a really popular place for circus performers to be laid to rest. And I thought that was super awesome. And that is the story of, well, I'm glad you're here. That's the story of the one of the greatest railroad catastrophes in America. So, Christy, if you'll go ahead and request the box, I have a lot of really fun facts, and I'm really excited about this. I'm glad that we get to end it on a super light, super fun note. Um, and there is some fun facts about the circus. I tell you what, you guys should Google fun facts about the circus. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've never actually seen the circus, so this is interesting.
You've never been to the circus? I definitely recommend going.
Mm.
I definitely do. All right. So, um, in the last 250 years is for how long they have existed, there happen to be some exciting things that could be said about modern circuses, some positive and some negative. Many ancient civilizations like Egyptian, Chinese, Indian, Greek, Roman, Norse, Aztec, and Polynesians knew about juggling. Like they actually were
Oh,
juggling.
wow.
There are 8 variants of tightrope walking. There's the tight wire, the high wire, the slack wire, the skywalk, the slack lining, freestyle slack lining, funamumble, and julatagi. That's a Korean
Oh,
style.
didn't know there was that many.
I didn't either. The first modern circus was opened in 1768 by Philip Astley, but some say that circuses, as a way of public entertainment, originate from ancient Rome and their circuses. The first modern circus appeared in the United States in Philadelphia in 1793, and its owner was Englishmen John and Bill Ricketts. USSR opened its State University of Circus and Variety Arts or the Moscow Circus School in 1927. J. Purdy Brown was the first to place circus inside a giant big top tent, and he did that in 1825. So when you see the circus tents, you
Uh-huh.
know how like there's the look like regular almost walls, and then they come up to a kind of a peak.
Yeah.
He was the one that first started doing the big top tents.
Hmm.
Circo Atayde, Atayde, is the oldest still running circus in the world. It was founded on August 26th of 1888 in Plaza de Toros in Mexico and is still run by the same family. Um, the contemporary circus, as we know it today, appeared for the first time in the 1970s. It's combination of classic circus and theater. So the circuses is actually called theater.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it technically is theater. Some estimations are that there are around 20,000 clowns in the world. 20,000. Circus performers consider whistling and eating peanuts backstage bad luck.
Hmm.
They carry hair from an elephant's tail in their pocket for good luck. And circuses are often accused of mistreatment of animals. This is true. Circuses are often plagued with that stigma of mistreatment of animals, and some
I've
of
heard
them
of that.
probably do. Some of them probably do. I need to go turn on my fan real quack, because my phone's gonna die. Or not gonna die, it's gonna overheat. Okay. So, that's all that I've got for the circuses. But if you guys want to know more, you guys should definitely look it up because it's awesome. I personally love the circus. I've been to the circus several times. I rode on the elephants. I've rode on the
Oh,
giraffes. I've rode on
oh,
the
that'd be fun.
camels.
I love giraffes.
It is. It's a lot of fun. So if you guys get the chance, I would definitely suggest checking it out. It's pretty cool. And then to watch all of the performers, these guys practice their performances for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And so I think it's important to encourage that. I think it's important to support them because what they're doing is entertainment. Yes, yes, there are still circuses around. Definitely. So honorable mentions. Let's get into honorable mentions. So yesterday was Juneteenth. We all know about that, right?
Yes, I actually recently just learned about what that was.
Yeah. So that's a big reason that I picked the first two topics that I did is to highlight on Juneteenth because it is an important holiday. I'm really glad that it's now a federal holiday. Um, so that's a big reason why I think it's important to remember history. So, honorable mentions. What I do for honorable mentions is I talk about last week, different interesting things that happened last week. And one of those things is on the 19th, so yesterday, baseball great Lou Gehrig was born in New York. He played 2,130 consecutive games and 7 World Series in the New York Yankees for the New York Yankees and had a lifetime batting of average of .340. That's really good. Um, he contracted the degenerative muscle disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, now called Lou
Gehrig.
Gehrig, now
Yeah.
called Lou Gehrig disease, and he died June 2nd, 1941. Dr. Sally Ride, a 32-year-old physicist and pilot, became the first American woman in space, beginning a 6-day mission aboard the space shuttle, the Challenger, launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida, June 18th, 1983. And after much debate, the U.S. Senate voted 19 to 13 in favor of a declaration of war against Great Britain, prompted by Britain's violation of Americans' rights on the high seas and British incitement of Indian warfare on the western frontier. The next day, President James Madison officially proclaimed the U.S. to be in a state of war. The War of 1812 lasted over 2 years and ended with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent in Belgium on December 24th, 1814. Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space as her Soviet, no, that's not the right one. Warren G. Harding became the first U.S. president to broadcast a message over the radio. The event was the dedication of the Francis Scott Key Memorial in Baltimore. And that was in June 14th, 1922. Also on June 14th of 1775, though, the first U.S. military service, the Continental Army, consisted of 6 companies of riflemen, and it was established by the Second Continental Congress. The next day, George Washington was appointed by a unanimous vote to command the army. On June 13th, 1971, the New York Times began publishing the Pentagon Papers, a collection of top secret documents exposing U.S. strategy in the Vietnam War. And then, of course, Anne Frank. Anne Frank was born June 12th, 1929, and we all know who Anne Frank was. She was a pillar in releasing the Jews, liberation of the Jews.
Like the concentration camps around the time of Hitler. I had to read her diary in school, in middle school.
I loved it. I loved the book. I think that everybody should have to read it. I'm big on history because history doesn't change just because we don't like what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to end this with a final thought. My final thought is we as humans, Americans, need to do better. We need to understand that people are people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what religion you follow. It doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are. It doesn't matter what your financial status is. It doesn't matter if you're single or married. None of that matters. We as people need to start looking at people for who they are.
Uh-huh.
In the way of their personalities, how they treat people, their ideas, their opinions, their feelings, their values. We need to look at people as people and leave it there. I don't think that it's necessary to discriminate against anyone for any reason. I think that we are all people, and I think that we should all start acting accordingly. Everyone should start acting accordingly. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Christy, do you have any thoughts?
No, that was a lot of information to take in.
It is. Imagine doing the reports. Everybody, please favorite Christy. Please go see her. We're trying to get her off on the right foot. She's going to do her second stream ever tonight. I'm going to set a timer, so I will be there. She'll be live about 11 p.m. Eastern time.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. So please go support her in that. Josh, I would love to hear your ideas and thoughts about the topics for today. Please make sure that you all favorite me as well. I am trying to get up to my 5,000 favorites by the end of the month. It's not looking too promising though, so let's hurry and get those favorites. You'll get it. Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming to Person, Place, and Thing. Christy, if you don't have anything else you'd like to say, you're welcome to go, or you can hang out. It's completely up to you. Thank you, Minessa. All right, you guys, person, place, or thing, thank you for coming, where we talk about a person, place, or a thing for this week in history. If there's any topics that you guys would like to see me discuss, um, send me a message, hit my Instagram. There's all sorts of things I cover. Yes, so it is this week in history. Yes, it is a bird. It's my bird. His name is Cole, and in 2 minutes I'll go get him for you after the show. Um, every Tuesday at 11 a.m. So if you guys want to come back and learn more about the show, please do. I would love to have you back here. Again, every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm not sure what the topics will be next week. I haven't got that far, but I definitely know that it'll be light. I don't want to do another deep one. I would like to do a lighthearted one. And that's it. So we're going to go ahead and end out the show a couple seconds early. Everybody, please favorite Emoji J. If you would like to be on the show, please contact him. You are so welcome, Christy, and he will be able to get you on the show. And yeah, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate all of you, and thank you for all of the gifts. I'm sorry I can't acknowledge them during the show, but I do appreciate them. And I know I missed a ton of comments. I do apologize for that. It's hard for me to stay focused if I'm trying to read all of the comments. Definitely. Yeah, I'm not sure what to say now. Well, I wasn't trying to be rude. I definitely wasn't trying to be rude. It's every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Yep. Eastern Standard Time, yes. Okay. Yep. Well, you just missed it. Just barely. Let me go grab my bird. It's called Person, Place, or Thing, where we go over this week in history. I know. Okay, this is Cole. Okay. It's okay. Oh, that pretty bird. Oh, that pretty bird right there. Yeah, who is it? Him so pretty. Say hi. Hi, Scott. Yeah. Really? Hey. Hi, baby. No? What? What? Come here. Come here, big guy. Okay, be up there then. He's just pissed. He's really mad. Teacher, I would make a terrible teacher. Hi, my Scott. Cole! Hey! Hey, Emoji J, can you